Page 11. Question number 3. Discuss the position and importance of Edward II in Marlowe's own dramatic work, or in what respects, if any, does Edward II mark an advance on Marlowe's previous plays? Answer. Before he died at the age of 29, Marlowe was able to write the best of the tragedies on national history which preceded Shakespeare's tragedies. His genius certainly matured. Here he achieved that self-effacement which is an essential quality of a successful dramatist. Edward II shows qualities which are properly dramatic and are found in none of its predecessors. The lyrical declamation is under restraint. The tirades are shorter and the dialogue is better distributed in speeches. The blank verse is less strained and more pliable, nearer to the tones of human voice. Progress in character study is evinced over a numerous and diversified cast. Marlowe's other dramas are dominated by the commanding figures of their heroes. But in this play, while Edward II dominates the play, other characters also bear marks of genius. The characters that are opposed to the king have individualities of their own. Among these characters, Mortimer and Isabel, and, to a lesser degree, Gaveston and Spencer Jr., are persons who, by the side of the king, are not at all insignificant creatures. The fate of the willful impetuous king is determined by these characters. Mortimer grows as a Machiavellian villain, Machiavellian, Machiavellian villain towards the end, and reminds the readers of Tamburlaine and Barabbas. Gaveston and the young Spencer are well-defined types. Marlowe suggests the aggressive inferiority of Mortimer, the vanity of Lancaster, and the unscrupulousness of Warwick. Even Prince Edward is endowed with an individuality. Thus, the one-man show of the previous plays gives place to interesting and mutually reacting groups or individuals in Edward II. As a result of this, the plot of the play is evolved through the interaction of characters and situations. Indeed, in the power of characterization, Edward II shows the most distinctive evidence of growth. In the matter of plot and construction, the play stands on a different level from the author's previous plays. Instead of being a collection of unconnected episodes or the imperfect fulfillment of a great design, Edward II is a complex and organic whole, working up by natural stages to a singularly powerful climax. Indeed, the play shows maturity in Marlowe's dramatic technique. Marlowe has learned to develop his action through nervous dialogue suited to character and situation, with fewer set speeches and exercises in rhetoric. It is a more complex action in which tragedy does not spring from mere villainy and involves more than death or damnation. Marlowe has also learned to keep his eye on the dramatic object. He presents a sober, objective account of political struggles that reflect the growing individualism of the Renaissance. He succeeds in building up sympathy for Edward II, a weak, self-indulgent monarch who, like Shakespeare's Richard II, brings about his own ruin, but takes on dignity as he is dethroned and struggles desperately to maintain this dignity as he is humiliated, tortured, and finally murdered. For the first time, Marlowe stirs considerable pity. In style also, from the dramatic point of view, Edward II marks an advance. The high-sounding terms of the earlier period have almost entirely disappeared, though there is still a plentiful supply of the unreasonable classical allusions which had so irresistible a fascination for Elizabethan playwrights. Otherwise, the language is of chastened simplicity, chastened, chastened simplicity, verging at time on baldness, but full for the most part of silvery charm and grace. Page 12. Within quotes, the measure, close quotes, as has been aptly said, open quotes, that had thundered the threats of Tamburlaine is now made to filter the sobs of a broken heart. Close quotes. Such language and measure as Edward speaks towards the end is tremulous with passion and pathos, and is at the same time characterized by chiseled simplicity. Within quotes, tell Isabella the Queen I looked not thus, when for her sake I ran at tilt in France. Close quotes. In this play there is blend of poetry and drama. In Marlowe's earlier plays, notably Tamburlaine and Dr. Faustus, the long passages of poetry have little or no dramatic value. They are high-flown declamations remarkable for their poetic fervour and imaginative pictures. But in Edward II, the particular moods or emotions of characters, the poetic effusions of Edward in his captive life reveal, within quotes, the reluctant pangs of abdicating royalty, close quotes. The soliloquies of Mortimer and Isabel reveal the working of their hearts. Question 4. What are the sources of Marlowe's Edward II? How does he handle them? Or, write a note on Marlowe's treatment of history in Edward II. Or, open quotes, while Marlowe follow in Edward II fairly closely the actual details of history, he boldly transfer their order for greater dramatic effect. Close quotes, discuss. Or, open quotes, the view of the history of the reign or Edward II, open quotes, the view of the history of the reign of Edward II given by Marlowe is generally correct, but he omits and condenses freely so as to make the action more continuous and dramatic. Close quotes. Discuss. Answer. Marlowe's authorities in the play Edward II are Holinshed's Chronicle of England and the Chronicles of Fabian and Stowe. F-A-B-Y-A-N, Fabian, and Stowe, S-T-O-W-E. Marlowe knew all these popular chronicles of his time. Tancock, T-A-N-C-O-C-K, Tancock observes, open quotes, it need not, however, be surprising if the poet has drawn his history from several sources, there is no need to think of him as a man of one book, for the Elizabethan poets knew the early history of England as it was current, legends and all, and loves to dwell on it. Close quotes. Marlowe follows mainly Holinshed's chronicle. This is supplemented with details from Fabian and Stowe. 3 chronicles cover more or less the same facts. On the whole, Marlowe is true to history. The historical materials treated in the drama extend over 23 years. It gives an intimate picture of the turbulent times. The fierceness of the nobles like Lancaster, Leicester, Pembroke, the contemptuous disdain of Gaveston, the Frenchman, the brutality of Warwick, and aggressive inferiority of Mortimer give a fairly true picture of the unsettled age of medieval barbarism. The political intrigue, the friction between monarch and subjects, the helplessness of the king to enforce his wishes are historical and are vividly brought out. The clergy of the period were generally on the side of the barons in any dispute between the barons and the king. The part which the Bishop of Coventry plays as a victim of the anger of the king and his favourite Gaveston reflects the attitude of the clergy of the time. Edward II in history was an extremely weak-willed person, foolishly proud of his kingship, yet lacking in the qualities of firmness, valour and judgment. His unreasonable attitude, his mismanagement of country's affairs, his choice of favourites are all historical. Edward's ineffectuality, his choice of favourites, his angry barons, his revolted wife, and his wretched end are all as in the chronicles of the age. Thus Marlowe keeps the spirit of history and is faithful to historical details. Page 13. Marlowe, however, treats the events and characters of history in a bold and free spirit. He omits and condenses freely so as to make the action more continuous and dramatic. He omits the king's voyage to France and his marriage, the second banishment of Gaveston to Flanders, and the banishment and recall of the Spencers. F. P. Wilson says, open quotes, he threw aside as unsuitable to his purpose much material connected with the wars with Scotland and Ireland and France, many a private war between baron and baron, and of course all those trivial disconnected details which chroniclers recorded. Close quotes. From Marlowe and the early Shakespeare. These omissions are necessary for the artistic treatment of history. He has rearranged the order of events during the course of long 23 years for the sake of dramatic stringency. He transposes the Battle of Bannockburn, 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 from the 7th year of Edward II to the lifetime of Gaveston, not later than the 5th year of the reign. The whole story of the Spencers is connected with that of Gaveston by making the younger Spencer a page or esquire in attendance on the Earl of Gloucester's daughter, who is to marry Gaveston, and by representing the elder Spencer as a stranger introduced to the king by his son. The attack of the barons on the Spencers, which belonged to the 12th year of the reign, is brought into close connection with the death of Gaveston in the 5th. The principal movements of the baronial war, which consisted of 1. The surrender of the two Mortimers to the King's grace at or near Shrewsbury, Shrewsbury, Shrewsbury. 2. Operations against Thomas of Lancaster and the Earl of Hereford, Hereford, Hereford. And 3. The signal defeat of the noblemen at Boroughbridge are easily and naturally related as single victory gained by the king over their combined forces. Kent's joining the barons and the latter's attempt to capture Gaveston are almost simultaneous. In history, he went over to the enemies in 1326, while Barons' clash with Gaveston took place in 1312. In the play, the Barons' demand for the banishment of the Spencers and the king's war upon them took place not long after the death of Gaveston. But in history, Gaveston's death occurred in 1312, while other two events came in 1321 and 1322 respectively. Mortimer escapes from the town historically in 1322 and joins the Queen in France historically in 1326. In dramatizing the history, Marlowe has compressed and telescoped events. In Act 5, the whole action is so condensed as to omit the long period of Mortimer's usurpation of power, and swift punishment is made to overtake those who have sinned. The art of compression is best seen in the case of the two Spencers. Open quotes, dramatic economy forces them into the position of mere appendages to Gaveston, Spencer Jr. and Baldock, first appearing as needy persons who attach themselves to the king's favourite for their own advantage, and in due course are presented by him to the king. This device neatly telescopes the two separate phases of Edward's career. The Spencers were too closely associated with his fall to be left out altogether, and since they had to be used, Marlowe's treatment of them as an extension of the Gaveston theme is highly ingenious. When Gaveston dies, they remain at hand to demonstrate the king's fatal need for bosom companions. Close quotes. From Charlton and Waller, Waller, Waller. In Holinshed, the younger Mortimer rises into prominence only after the Queen has landed in England with an army from France. But Marlowe carries back the relationship between Mortimer and the Queen much earlier. By carrying their relationship back in time and making Mortimer the centre of opposition of Gaveston as well as to the Spencers, Marlowe secures continuity and creates a subplot very closely related to the main issue. Page 14. Thus, Marlowe has done a great service to the history play by the concentrative and dramatic ordering of events. Question 5. Examine Edward II as a historical play. Answer. Marlowe's Edward II is a fairly typical English historical play. The earliest historical play, King Johann, K-Y-N-G, King J-O-H-A-N, Johann, approaches more a morality play than a historical play proper for the numerous personifications as of sedition, dissimulation, usurped power, etc. Moreover, the disregard of history shown in the treatment of King John's character and the vigorous note of contemporary spirit sounded in attacks upon the Pope and the papal supremacy prevent its being a really historical play after the type of Marlowe and Shakespeare. The old historical plays in Marlowe's own life are little more than somewhat rough reproductions of one or other of the popular chronicles with little dramatic construction and little development of motive and of character. The famous victories of Henry V and the troublesome regime of King John are very poor and rough reproductions. Two other plays, the first part of the contention between the two famous houses of York and Lancaster and the true tragedy of Richard, Duke of York, were produced in 1591. These plays were written in prose or crude blank verse. They are poor in dramatic construction and characterization. They have plenty of action and little attempt at the evolution of the story. They present unconnected series of romantic incidents. Edward II claims the distinction of being the first successful history play and anticipates the more vigorous attempts in this genre by Shakespeare and others. Edward II is history in the main, well presented, history well dramatized. Marlowe shows real dramatic art by presenting history through compression, omission, and reordering of historical events. The historical materials treated in the drama extend over 23 years. For the purpose of the drama, these materials have been condensed, many details omitted, and the relationship of persons reordered. The long period of Edward's reign has been skillfully compressed by an artistic union of the stories of Gaveston and Spenser, and by condensing the principal movements of the Baronial War into a single victory gained by the king over the combined forces. He omits the king's voyage to France and his marriage, the second banishment of Gaveston to Flanders, and the banishment and recall of the Spensers. The whole story of the Spensers with supreme skill and judgment is connected with that of Gaveston by making the younger Spenser a page or esquire in attendance on the Earl of Gloucester's daughter, who is to marry Gaveston, and by representing the elder Spenser as a stranger introduced to the king by his son. The whole period of Edward's reign has been skillfully compressed by an artistic union of the stories of Gaveston and Spenser. The different phases of the king's quarrel with the barons have been combined as a single operation in which the king's forces overcame the barons. The result is dramatic unity and intensity. In this play, Marlowe's feeling for dramatic technique best reveals itself. Seeking to hasten the movement of the play, he constantly condenses, playing false with history. For example, in Scene 2 of Act 3, he deals with the death of Gaveston, which occurred in 1312, the protest of the barons against the Spencers, which occurred in 1319, and the incident of the lands of Lord William de Bruce, which took place in 1321. This scene also shows his care for motivation. By making the king heap honours on the old Spencer and, in his natural anger, take the young Spencer at once into Gaveston's place, Marlowe, though playing fast and loose with historical time, motivates the prompt transfer of the hatred of the barons from Gaveston to Spencer. Page 15. The most marked instance of technique in Edward II is that Marlowe, in his desire to unify his material, attains to plot. He cheerfully remakes history. With him, the Spencers become followers and admirers of Gaveston. He completely changes history by putting two Mortimers in the same relation towards Gaveston that they really bore towards young Spencer. All these changes make for unification and for naturalness of conduct. These changes give Marlowe an emotional response which the sequence and emphasis in Holinshed could not give him on the stage. Marlowe thus shows a degree of technical skill in his management of historical sources. He creates a sense of rapid evolution of event towards the catastrophe by bridging the gulfs that separate events in real history. The daring and the most dramatic bridging of the time gap is effected when Marlowe introduces the execution of Mortimer by order of the young king before the funeral of the dead old king. Thus, Marlowe's Edward II is a blend of history and imagination. Marlowe shows his dramatic imagination in the creation of the character of Kent, which is the dramatist's invention, close bracket. He assigns to him an interest in the conflict between the king and his barons. Queen Isabel, too, in the earlier scenes, is a figure which Marlowe recreates from his dramatic imagination. Isabel and Mortimer change abruptly. Although Marlowe drops certain hints for their change, but they are not adequate to motivate their changes. But Marlowe succeeds in presenting, within open quotes, the equilibrium of personalities in the dramatic conflict, close quotes. The successive favourites of Edward and his henchmen are a group in conflict with the baronial coterie led by Lancaster and Mortimer. Marlowe is faithful to history in regard to the characters. Historical Edward reveals all the unlovable qualities of a degenerate, man of physical strength and of arrested mental development, fond of low company and possessed of low cunning. Out of these wearisome records, Marlowe has created a poem full of inevitable pathos, which, if not tragic, at least approaches that realm of art. Lastly, though Marlowe takes liberties with the facts of history, he keeps the spirit of history by producing the total impression of the pitiful personality of Edward II and the vicious temper of the nobles and their greed for power. Thus, with Marlowe's Edward II, the chronicle play is disciplined into tragedy, and the events of 23 years are telescoped for dramatic purposes. The tragedy is not diffuse, for it concentrates on an uncommon conception of a weak man as a central protagonist, a type found again with an ample modifications in Shakespeare's Richard II.